And I was like, what?
Hi, everybody. I'm Merete Sanderhoff. I'm a curator and senior advisor of digital museum practice at SMK, Statens Museum for Kunst, the National Gallery of Denmark in Copenhagen. And I'm coming to you from my home office. And I bet all of you out there are also working remotely. It's nice that we can still meet and exchange. And I'd like to give you some of my thoughts on OpenGlam today. First, I'd like to talk a bit about the main benefits of OpenGlam in my view. I've been working with OpenGlam for many years now, almost 15. And I always say that one of the great benefits of OpenGlam is that we manage, by opening up our collections, to put cultural heritage into the hands of users. And that's a powerful way to remove the distance between people and heritage. Often when you come into a museum, you have to keep a distance to respect safety and not damage the works. And I think that can really make a lot of people feel not so interested in heritage, that it feels distant from them. But when we digitize and open up these digital reproductions and all the data can be something that people can feel close to and can do what they want, fulfill their dreams and their purposes. That's one thing. So it's always for me been tied to a democratization of our cultural heritage to open it up. But more and more in recent years, where we've seen a lot of problems with misinformation and fake news on the internet, there's also a new important layer of benefit to OpenGlam. Because as we say popularly, if it's not on the internet, it doesn't exist. I think this holds true for a lot of people in the world. That's where they go to look for information. And if they don't find it there, they won't necessarily know how to look in physical archives or libraries, etc. So we have an obligation actually to open up fact-check knowledge in our institutions, our knowledge institutions, our heritage institutions, and remove the barriers between that content and the diversity of users out there. So OpenGlam, in that sense, is a great benefit to our democracy. Now, if we try to look at the barriers to OpenGlam, this is also something I've worked with a lot as an advisor to colleagues, both in Denmark and all over the world. And the two things it often comes down to is fear of losing control over how our heritage is used. Is it used for good or bad things in our perception? And the other thing is money. And I recently heard a quote from an environmental activist called Gus Speth, so from a completely different sphere than cultural heritage. But it got me thinking about the connections between the problems that we are facing today as a global connected world. He said something about the main barriers to solving the climate crisis. And he said, well, I used to think the big problems we have is loss of biodiversity and ecosystem collapse, etc. But he had come to the conclusion that the real problems are selfishness, greed, and apathy. And what that made me wonder is what in our constitution, what in our habits are standing in the way of change. So I think for the cultural heritage sector, some of the same things are inhibiting a good development. Not to say in any way that cultural heritage institutions are selfish or greedy, but we are living under some very rigid economic structures that force us to make money off of our users. Whereas I think there's much bigger value in cultural heritage as an open resource. But we define value in monetary terms instead of looking at other types of value and impact. And again, the loss of control, that fear, is maybe a kind of habit that is also standing in the way of just embracing that people out there are ready and willing to do all kinds of wonderful things with their heritage if we trust them and allow them to. We have great experience with users who just blow our minds with the things they do with our open collection at SMK. I'd like to share something with you that opened my mind about Open Glam. That was an advisor we used at SMK when we, more than 10 years ago, started to open up our collection. That was Michael Edson, who's a great friend and true mentor for many of us in the glam sector. And his advice to us when we started wondering about how could we maybe perhaps open up was very simple. Think big, start small, move fast. And that piece of advice was really productive to us because we have a big collection and many different considerations. But we could have a vision and just start with something instead of wanting to do everything at once. So that was liberating to try and do that. And it got us kicked off into a journey of Open Glam. Instead of waiting until we had planned a perfect rollout, we just started, and then it happened over time. I think in our sector, we're used to wanting to do everything perfectly, but sometimes it's okay to start small. But then coming back to the times we're living in, it's challenging times, and I'm not so sure about the move fast part anymore. Of course, there's a very rapid technological development that we have to deal with and keep up to speed with at some level. But I think we also have to acknowledge that there are both potentials and setbacks to the digitization of our societies, the digitalization in broader terms of our societies. And as knowledge institutions, as heritage institutions for everyone, I think we have to also stop and reflect on how we implement the digitalization of heritage in ethically sound ways that include everyone and make sure that we don't give privileges to some people in society and not to others when we do this. And also consider the carbon footprint of digitizing and storing large amounts of data and the traffic that generates. So think big, start small, reflect. I'd like to just give a personal message to all of you considering what to do about your heritage collection and whether to work with Open Glam principles. I think that, like with the climate crisis that we are in, we are realizing, all of us, that we can't keep doing what we used to do. And the same goes for how we handle and take care of cultural heritage and our collections. And like the changes we have to implement to fight the climate crisis, I think Open GLAM is one of the keys to creating a more sustainable cultural heritage environment. Because Open GLAM creates relevance, it creates value for users. So this is a way of maintaining our value in the wider society that we're part of, and to establish that we play a key role. Our collections, our institutions, that we hold this valuable, fact-checked, reliable knowledge, that we hold high quality resources that you can trust, and that it's for everyone, not just the privileged few. So in that sense, Open GLAM is part of a wider movement towards a more sustainable society. And it's urgent that we embrace that new obligation for cultural heritage institutions. Thanks so much for listening.